Life is way better not drinking, but it's definitely a process. Your story is going to help someone else, the more brave and vulnerable you are about it.
Hi, welcome to the Sober Spill. Today we have Casey McGuire Davidson. Casey is a life and sobriety coach, speaker, and host of the top 100 mental health show, the Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women. Casey's been featured on Good Morning America, NPR, HuffPost, The New York Times, NBC News, and more. She helps high-achieving women change their relationship with alcohol so they can drink less and live more. Welcome to the Sober Spill, Casey.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, I love your podcast, and I have been listening to quite a few episodes. And I just wanted to start, if you could tell us, I guess, like a little bit about everything, how you got here, how long you've been doing your podcast, what inspired you to start this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I started my podcast almost 5 years ago, which is crazy to me. I think I'm on episode 280 or something. So I've been doing it a long time. But what actually first got me started on this work, I'm a life and sobriety coach, and I work with women who want to stop drinking. We start with a 100-day break to kind of get them into the rhythm of sobriety and working on all those sober muscles and navigating the world. But the reason I started this was because for basically 20 years after I left high school, I loved drinking. Like, I had a love-hate relationship with drinking in that I had no off switch. But it was my favorite thing in the world. And so for many, many years, I identified as a red wine girl. Everybody knew me that way. And I was drinking about a bottle a night. And oddly, it wasn't anything that raised too many eyebrows. All my girlfriends drank. Everyone I surrounded myself with drank a lot. And that wasn't really commented upon, except I drank way more than any of them did. So, I've been with my husband now over 2 decades. I stopped drinking 10 years ago. So we had been together for, 14 years by the time I decided to take a break from drinking. And he always knew me as a drinker, but he didn't know anything about all the stuff behind the surface. He didn't know about how worried I was about my drinking, or how many times I had tried to take a break, or all the rules I had around only wanting to drink 2 drinks a night and then blowing that out every single day, and everything, the 3 a.m. wake ups, the anxiety, the worrying if I had enough. And so I spent a very long time trying to get a handle on my drinking, very consciously, so that I would never have to stop. I thought that if I stopped drinking, like, my entire life would be awful, and it would be deprivation and isolation, and I'd be miserable anytime I went out with my girlfriends. And that all, in case someone's listening, that is all not true. Life is way better not drinking, but it's definitely a process. So I finally stopped drinking with the help of a sober coach. I started with a 100-day challenge. I joined an online program as well for women who wanted to stop drinking. And I couldn't make it past day 4 when I started that. I had tried so many times. And on day 4, I would break and drink a bottle of wine a night. And then I'd do another 4 days and do it again. And in my mind, I was like, well, 2 bottles a week is way better than 8, which is true. But I was still just stuck in that drinking and withdrawal and craving cycle. I never got to the good part. So I started on a 100-day challenge. I wanted to drink the night I signed up, but I didn't, because I'd made this investment and I didn't want to disappoint my coach. And I'm kind of a people pleaser and an overachiever. So I wanted like the gold star in sobriety as well. And then I just kept going. So I made it past day 4, and then day 16, and then day 30. And I started feeling so much better. So when I got to 100 days, I extended it to 6 months. It wasn't until I got to a year that I was like, you know what? I think I'm done. I feel better. I know what it's like when I go back to drinking. I'm going to do this. And then for a couple of years, I just happily lived my life, same job, same husband, same house, same kids. I quit drinking when my kids were 2 and 8 years old. and didn't want not drinking or sobriety to define my life. I kind of put it in the same way I used to put being an ex-red wine girl. Like, I used to be like, I'm Casey. I live in Seattle. I'm a director of marketing. I'm a red wine girl. I am married. And then it just became, I'm a director of marketing. I quit drinking. I'm married. And then I think what happens is when you get rid of the alcohol, you get unstuck. And some of the stuff that used to be you were just holding on to try to get through is no longer meaningful to you. So I got to the point where like being a director of marketing and e-commerce, like I just didn't care. I didn't care if we hit our numbers.
Huge. I want to pause on that because that is huge in our society, I think, to get to that place too, where you're getting all the accolades. I mean, I think that's one of the things that strikes me most about your website. I'm like, oh, like and many, I think women can relate to this, like having it all online, we'll say. We won't even say on paper anymore, online, right? The kids, the family, the career, the job, and you work so hard to get there. And then to realize there might be something else, or maybe I don't need all this is huge, and a big leap of faith. Yeah. So I wanted to actually ask about that because this is, I see how and even, I mean, your website is absolutely gorgeous and I could see the marketing come through. I'm like, oh my God, she's so talented. Just the flow of it. It's really stunning. But how was it to leave a career that you are so good at and take this totally different venture, a totally different career? I want to know that, but I also really, and I hope this isn't bad podcast form, but I don't want to miss a really important point that I found, and I don't know if you found this in some of your cohort and the women you work with. A lot of women don't even know this whole world is out there, this whole sober culture world, sober coaching, residential treatment, IOP, which is intensive outpatient. People don't know. Like a lot of clients that we get are familiar with treatment even, and they don't know what a sober coach is. So how did you even find out about that from your corporate world? And were you shocked when you it's like pulling back the curtain and you see wow, there is a whole world out here?
Pulling a thread and it just, one tool leads you to another tool leads you to a different resource. Now, I have to say, like a ton of women, I stopped drinking almost 10 years ago. It was not my first rodeo. So the first time I really was like, oh, damn, I got an issue with alcohol and I need some help with this, was actually 13 years ago. So if you do the math on that, I stopped drinking for a year. I went back to drinking for 2 years, and then I finally stopped for good. So 13 years ago, there literally was almost nothing. The only resource I knew out there was 12-step AA program. I didn't have a single friend who had stopped drinking. Nobody had told me I had a problem. So I'm in Seattle. I'm pretty high achieving. I've got, I'm married. I have kids. I have a great life. I take good vacations. And yet I would go into work every single day being hungover, walking into Starbucks being like, okay, I need my breakfast sandwich and a giant latte because I was shaky, and debating to myself, am I actually an alcoholic? Or because that was the only term I knew, right? 13 years ago. And I didn't want to be in that category. And I think I'm saying that because I don't think there is anything wrong with that label. I think it helps a million people. But when you don't know anyone who has stopped drinking, all you know is what is put forth in the media about it. So at the time, I did not want to be in that category. So I was like, am I an alcoholic, or do I just, abuse alcohol? Because I was like, if I abuse it, I can just abuse it less and then we'll all be good. So that was a daily struggle for me. So I hired a therapist specifically because on, their website, it said they dealt with anxiety and addiction. And I went in and I was like,
my anxiety.
Let's talk about my anxiety and, all the reasons we have to drink, right? My boss is a nightmare. I have too much pressure on myself. I've got a 5-year-old kid. My husband doesn't help the commute, whatever. And I was like, and I drink a bottle of wine a night. And of course, he specializes in addiction. He was like, let's talk about your drinking. And I was like, no. Let's talk about my boss, And so, of course, he knew that 80% of my problems was my drinking and what it was doing to my nervous system and my emotions and my relationships and my time management. He had been through 12-step program. He was sober. So he encouraged me to join that program. around the same time, because I was finally searching for blogs and people who had quit drinking and books, I found this online group. There are a bunch of them out there now. There was
Yeah.
very little then, sort of an secret online, at the time, Facebook group for people who were going booze free. And I posted there, was terrified. I put a picture of me and my adorable little 5-year-old son, who was a redhead, and was like, I'm Casey. I'm, 38 years old at the time. I am really terrified to be here. I've been trying to moderate. I can't. Like, basically, this sucks, and I was like shaking as I posted it.
Yeah. Were you scared that someone would see you, another mom? Because I think that's a big fear that a lot of moms have. If other moms know I'm struggling, they're not going to let their kid come over and play.
Oh my
They're not
God,
going to let their
right.
kid in my car. And you posted a picture as a mom in that moment. I think before there was more public sobriety, certainly a decade ago. Were you scared of that?
Well, I had been in the group for about 10 days before I was brave enough to post. So I had been reading what everybody else had said. It was, I did post with like my actual account, like my personal account. But okay, I was so scared. So I posted it and then I went back to my public account and I like refresh to make sure it didn't come out on my public Facebook. And then I had to go to a meeting. So I was like, all right, I got to go to a meeting. I came back an hour later. There were 28 comments on my post from all these women being like, your son is beautiful. Your story is just like mine. You're so brave. It's going to be okay. Like all these women. And I was in tears in my big fancy office, just being like, oh my God, this is
I'm not
incredible.
alone. Yeah. And then you got that support. So I was so sorry that you got that support, even though it was people that you hadn't met before, and that's what I think is amazing is like, you can't explain that sometimes to people or articulate how powerful it is to get the support, even if you don't know them, to know, thank you for saying it out loud. And I think because of the history of 12 steps, sometimes in anonymity, and all the other stigma, people don't say it often enough. I'm not okay. And especially someone that's successful, and to put it out there, like in a public forum is really remarkable.
Yeah. I think it's so brave of people to find circles. And I think it's not literally not just about not drinking. Like of course, people know about the Me Too movement, but just the idea, like kids who struggle with, women who struggle whose kids are on the spectrum, and it's really incredibly hard. Finding other people dealing with that and being honest about how hard it is for you, or women who struggle with infertility or divorce, anything. You need other people where you can be honest about what's hard without trying to couch it or put on a front because you're afraid of them judging you. And the good part about the internet is that it is easy to find groups of people who are dealing with the same stuff that you are. And I found that I don't think I told my husband that I'd hired a sober coach when I finally stopped drinking for 7 months. I didn't tell him I was in an online program to stop drinking for 7 months. All I told him was I was going to do a health kick, a health challenge, and I was taking a 100-day break from drinking. That is it. And that's insane because we actually had a very good marriage. The fact that he had no idea I had this whole like other support network made me realize how I got away with drinking so much. And because it's not that like we were busy, right? He's head of a middle school. He's a varsity baseball coach. He was coaching varsity basketball. That meant he was gone a lot of evenings and weekends. And so weirdly, he knew I drank a bottle of wine a night. Some of that wasn't like too weird, which looking back, I'm like, really, dude? Like, all right. He would just say something when, like, for example, I'd open bottle number 2 on a Tuesday at 10 p.m. He'd be like, what are you doing, Casey? What's going on? And I was like, so defensive. I was like, what? I just need another bottle, another glass. Like, I've had a hard day. I was super defensive. So when I stopped drinking, I was pretty private about it with him too, because I didn't want, I knew we were going to be married forever. I didn't want him judging me. I wasn't sure it was going to stick. So I didn't want to stop drinking. I think most people don't actually want to stop drinking. They
No, they
want to
just want
feel
to.
better.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't want the repercussions, the hangovers, the weight
Yeah.
gain, the insomnia, the anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all been so brainwashed to believe that like all these good things in life come from alcohol or connecting over alcohol, or it helps you do something. So if I decided to take a break and go back to drinking, I didn't want him to know. And the reason I say that is because it was so incredibly helpful for me to have the support of people who understood, not my spouse who loved me, but didn't struggle with alcohol. So
He's
he had
not,
no
yeah,
idea.
a
He was
midlife
like, "Babe,
woman that struggles
just
with
drink less.
alcohol. Yeah.
Just like have 2 glasses of wine." He used to be like, so at one point he was like, "So you drink until it's gone or you fall asleep," which is adorable. I was like, "Yeah,
That's,
sweet way to say pass out. That's so cute,
yeah.
honey." But and it was true. And I told him, I was like, "Babe, when I start drinking, I just love how I feel. I love that feeling. You get that buzzy, fuzzy, lit up feeling." I was like, "I never want it to end." So in my mind, I'm like, if I just keep drinking, it'll go on longer, which is totally untrue. All it does is made me pass out and throw up and feel like garbage. But
But it gave you
yeah,
that reprieve at the moment, which again, I think a lot of women are looking for. You know, I hope it's okay to say, like, in listening to your podcast and some of your bio, I know the prep school you went to. I know the type of community and the pressure there is to look good, be good, excel. So to come out and say, I have a problem after being a captain of a collegiate sports team and all the other things you accomplished is pretty big. I think it's
yeah,
very hard. And I think our generation, you know, the midlife, you know, 40, you know, 5+ generation, we grew up very differently in the 80s and 90s, where there wasn't so much talk clearly about mental health. Kids didn't have mental health days. You know, it was very different. So I think sort of breaking those molds as you go, of
yeah.
allowing, you know, people to say, I'm not okay.
You know
Um,
what's interesting though, and I want to say this because I think it is a hurdle that I see so many women struggle with, and I did too. Um, I didn't raise my hand in my quote unquote real life, right? I have never called myself an alcoholic. When I went to 12 step for 4 months, I did it, but it was because like I felt like I would get pressure if I didn't. Um, I ended up stopping without a 12 step program. So I actually don't say I'm an alcoholic. I say I used to drink a lot and I quit and I feel better without it. Um, Full stop, end of story. I tell people I don't drink. Sometimes I tell people I'm sober. Most of the time I just say, "Oh, I quit drinking. Do you have anything awesome that's non-alcoholic?" So I think that you don't, especially today with the Sober Curious movement and Dry January and Sober October. I mean, you mentioned the articles I've been in, but like you can open up Vogue and there's articles
oh
about
yeah.
sober curiosity or alcohol-free life. So you don't have to say that you have a problem with alcohol to decide to take a break from drinking and see if you feel better without it. And that is gold because that's the hurdle that's hard for people. I mean, the truth is, and the news is out, you mentioned this about the younger generations knowing we weren't told that alcohol hurt our mental health. We weren't told it hurt our sleep. We were told it helped us. We were
Well,
never
I think,
told it caused
yeah,
cancer. We were told it was good for our heart, red
yeah,
wine. Maybe
yeah.
not a
Well,
bottle, but
but and I think too, there was the fear factor of, I think, the big mad was huge, you know, in the 80s. And there was this fear factor, but it also was, you know, all alternating with, you know, sort of the celebrity glamorous looks of smoking cigarettes still and of
yeah,
drinking. And now it is so different. But I thought it was interesting. One of your recent podcasts, you had Dr. Lemke on, and she was talking about how the rates actually of younger millennials are rising, especially in women, of drinking. And I'm curious if you see a shift in your population. I know what I see a big shift in. I'll share
tell
is
me
that
what you
a
see a
lot
shift
more of
in.
the white claw culture. Like, I don't think even people consider it drinking, but a lot of people aren't drinking bottles of wine, maybe the way our generation did. It's not the red wine ladies as much. It's all those alcoholic seltzers that
Yeah,
are out there.
yeah,
There's a whole plethora of them, and people love them because they're low cal and they're carb free. And people drink like 6 to 12 of them.
yeah,
So I think there is a shift in like the packaging of everything of like, oh, well,
Yeah.
this is different too because this doesn't have any calories or carbs.
Yeah, I know. It was so funny, right? I'd always be saving my calories for wine. And I was so oblivious that this might look bad. In the beginning, there's those stages, right? There was definitely a time where I would tell people I drank a bottle of wine a night with zero shame and didn't think they'd judge me because it was so normal to me and my friends. And I also thought that being a red wine girl was like somehow code
Like a
for
badge.
not being boring or like being more than a mom or like, don't worry, I'm still fun. I mean, we've been so brainwashed by what there are quizzes in Cosmo about like when I was growing up, what you drank and what that meant to about who you are, especially, of course, Cosmo related to men. So a woman who drinks a martini is X, but a woman who drinks wine is Y. And so it was almost like a personality trait. But here's what I see in the data. And Dr. Lemke, Anna Lemke, who wrote Dopamine Nation, is incredible. So anyone interested in this, you should pick up that book or listen to a podcast like mine that had her on because she is incredible. But the what I what I found was that it's super interesting, right? So baby boomers are the biggest drinkers, full stop. And, that they weren't told. I mean, if you listen or think back, when I was young, the French paradox came out, which was the idea that the people who drink red wine are healthier than those who don't. All those studies paid for by the alcohol industry came out saying people who don't drink at all are actually less healthy than those who drink on in moderation, which of course they skewed the studies because a lot of people who don't drink either struggled with alcohol in the past or have underlying medical conditions or are dealing with medical conditions. So the data is just factually incorrect.
Yeah.
But now people know. So baby boomers are the biggest drinkers by far. Gen X is next, and I'm Gen X. Millennials follow that. Gen Z drinks 30% less than their parents or grandparents did at the same age for all these incredible reasons. And that information is filtering up. I think during COVID, everybody drank a lot more. And actually, women increased their binge drinking by 40%. The stats are that parents of kids under the age of 5 increased their drinking during COVID by 323%.
Oh, yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So when you think about millennials during COVID, a lot of them had young kids. And so, I mean, my daughter, I had her late, but beginning of COVID, she was in kindergarten. Thank God I was sober. That would have been a huge mess. But I think now as we come out of COVID, the information about how bad alcohol is for you is finally filtering out. The studies have gone that within the last 2 years, the number of people who believe that alcohol, even in moderation, is bad for you has grown from somewhere in the 30% in America to 54% believe that.
Mhm.
And the wine industry, the beer industry, like they are freaking out about this. They're now trying to come out with studies that are like, yeah, but don't forget about the social benefits. We're isolated. You can drink with people. Like they're just trying to think anything because they're terrified that people are realizing that alcohol is actually poison to your body and your mind.
I'm Ricky, recovery support clinician. Managing withdrawal symptoms no longer means leaving home. Mountainside's new outpatient withdrawal management programs provide confidential, professional support with daily check-ins from our psychiatric and clinical team. It is designed for your busy life so you can heal without disruption. Find out more at mountainside.com.
Well, I want to go back to two. With your business shift, so you made this cultural shift yourself too, of like leaving, what I assume would be a very lucrative, very successful career in marketing, and then shifting to this burgeoning field that now is more common, with sober coaching. But how did you make that leap of faith? How did you decide, like, I'm going to leave this very successful career and do something like from the ground up too, because you have to start at the beginning anywhere when you restart yourself. And so many of the women I work with, they want to do something different. Maybe they've excelled in their career, they love what they did, but they are hungry to do something with more connection, more meaning, more purpose. That really is where they are in their life. But it's terrifying because how do you actually get paid for that? And how do you support a family by following your dreams?
Yeah. And I was the primary breadwinner in my house for basically my entire career until I became a coach. So it was very scary to me. I felt like oh God, so many things, right? But the first one is you stop drinking and you have to look at your triggers. You have to look at what makes you want to drink and understand why you drank in the first place. For me, it was an underlying mild mood disorder, anxiety, and also the fact that my job stressed me out so much. And I was in this field of digital marketing. I worked in tech. Emails came in on the weekend. Emails came in on, Friday night at 9 p.m. It was super stressful. We were always plugged in and the pace was relentless. And when I stopped drinking, I had to figure out other ways to manage that, right? And so I started going to therapy, found anti-anxiety meds and a mood disorder medication that was incredibly helpful to me. And it was actually my therapist who suggested that I become a sober coach, which is so funny. I mean, as a recovering perfectionist or a gold star girl, I was sort of that awesome combo that gets us in trouble of being like an overachiever and a people pleaser, which is lovely.
Which makes you very successful typically at work.
Well, oh God,
Really?
you get rewarded for that. Of course you do.
Totally.
You just run yourself into the ground with a smile on your face. So I didn't want to do anything without knowing the end game, right? Without knowing I was going to be successful. Like I would go to my therapist and be like, yeah, I don't like my job, but I can't make money like I am if I do anything else. Or I'll never get hired for, XYZ or whatever it is. And in sobriety, I actually had to teach myself to take small incremental steps and trust without knowing the outcome. That was one of the big things because I had all these limiting beliefs like, if I ever stop drinking, I'll have no friends, I'll be bored, I'll be boring, my life will be awful, right? And then I had to just start like, okay, 30 days, 100 days, 6 months and check in like, how do I feel? How is it going? Am I happier? Can I relax without it? Do I still have my friends? So I did that in transitioning careers too. So I went into my therapist who, didn't struggle with alcohol, but was amazing. I had already stopped. I'm not sure she would have been as helpful to me if I was trying to stop drinking because she didn't get it. But I went to her basically and was like in tears, like, here's how I feel. I stopped drinking 4 months ago. I can't go back to alcohol, so you have to help me. That was the point I was at when I went there. And I saw her for a year. And over the course of the year, she said to me, I really think you should look at becoming a sober coach and doing this for work. And I was like, nobody will make any money. Nobody will hire me. I'm in the sober world now. So I was like, everybody knows about all these tools and sober coaching and whatever. And she looked at me and was like, Casey, I have 5 women I'd refer to you tomorrow from Microsoft and Amazon because I work in Seattle tech, who need sober coaching. They need more than 50 minutes once a week. And I can't help them with this form of support. And she really encouraged me to look at it. And she was like, nobody knows about sober coaching. Nobody knows about these tools, this approach in the general population. And so I took it incrementally too. I decided like, I'm going to go back to coaching school on nights and weekends. I told my husband, I was like, look, it's these 3 days weekends, it's nights, it's these meetings, costed, at the time, $12,000. It's not cheap. And I was like, best case scenario, I love it. I'm good at it. And it's what I want to do for my next phase 2 career. Worst case scenario, I get some great personal development. Yep. I meet really interesting people and it'll help me in corporate world, right? I can be like, oh, I'm an executive coach or I'm a coach to help the people who work for me. Luckily, it was option A. I absolutely loved it. Turns out I was good at it. And I did eventually quit my job. But it was incremental, right? I had to overcome those fears. So I went back to coaching school. Then I went on a couple podcasts. Then I did private one-on-one coaching for women quitting drinking for about 8 months before I left my job. And then I was very lucky. Didn't seem lucky at the time, but my company decided to move my brand. I worked for L'Oreal. They decided to move the brand I was working for to New York City. And I live in Seattle, and I didn't want to go because my whole life is here. And so they laid me off and gave me 5 months severance. And I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. We're starting it. And I had some runway, and I had already built up a base of experience and some following and good tools. So I left corporate. My first year, I made less money than I'd made at age 22 in my first job out of college, which was humbling, I guess. And I had to work on my mindset to say, tech, you have layoffs, you have reorgs, you have so much change. Your job is actually very unstable. I'd been laid off 4 times in 20 years. But I'd probably been through 15 layoffs, meaning like where I stayed and other people left. So I had to work on my beliefs and say, actually, it is way more secure for me to build something for myself over time than to go from company to company, building things for them until their corporate mandate changes. So I did that. And here I am almost 6 years later, and it's amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. Though, again, in listening to that, I think there are a lot of people right now getting laid off, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment, even though we know there are factors beyond their control. So even just being able to say, I've been laid off, I think of how powerful that is to say that as someone that's successful and wants to win. And there are other people out there that need to hear that. Like, you will be okay. You will work again. Yes, it might look different and it might look really scary, and you didn't choose this.
Yeah.
But it's not too, like, that's one of those things too, where we get to separate ourselves from the situation. There's likely a lot of times right now that people had not very much control over this situation.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And there's nothing they could have done better. And for people that are perfectionists and work their tails off, it's really hard to accept that. So I appreciate you sharing that, because
I give my favorite tip about getting laid off.
Yes, please.
Okay. This again is a reframe, but it really helped me. So first of all, get unemployment. You have paid in for years and years and years. Unemployment's amazing, right? I know some people who don't even file for unemployment because they're embarrassed, right? When I left L'Oreal, I actually got paid my full salary plus unemployment for 5 months. So I was being paid more than I was. But please don't be embarrassed to file for unemployment. What they want you to do is to keep some level of income until you're able to find another job that suits you. The other thing that helps me is realizing that it is not because you're a bad performer. Having been in the corporate world for that many years, gone through that many layoffs, it's very arbitrary. You can be let go because you're too expensive, because it's a duplicate of an acquisition, possibly because you're not good, but most likely it is anything. You're not expensive enough. You're too expensive. There's overlap. They just don't want your division anymore. So just knowing it's not personal. The other thing I would say is my favorite line is that I'm taking a sabbatical. Like everybody's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What's going on? How you frame things helps you so much. And it's the same in stopping drinking. People are like, oh my God, you're not drinking. Is something wrong? You're like, no, I'm taking a health kick. I am sleeping better. I feel less anxiety. I have more energy. However you present it is how people are going to respond to you. So I always was like, you know what? I haven't taken a break from working in 5 years. I'm going to take a little sabbatical. I'm going to enjoy some time off, and then give it a date. In September, I'm going to jump back in, because that lets you recover, stop people from questioning you or feeling sorry for you. It immediately turns to like, oh my God, I wish I could take a sabbatical. It puts you in a position of power. And then once the dust has settled, you can go back and be like, I am ready to work again. Can you help me? I'm looking for XYZ. It can even just be 2 months off. Doesn't mean you don't have to look during that time, but it's such a reframe, and you come back from a position of power. Plus, you give yourself some breathing room. If you've been laid off, take a month if you can, take 2 months if you can. Um, Give yourself the opportunity to take a breath and be like, what do I want to do? Because sometimes it's an opportunity to reflect on what you actually care about.
Thank you for sharing that. And then how I want to definitely make sure we get to. So you're doing sober coaching. How did you take that next leap of faith to become a podcaster? I will just say transparently, I find podcasting very difficult. I don't know their term for. I've been a therapist for.
You're very good at it,
years.
so I can't tell.
It is totally different than therapy, and I find it very vulnerable to put yourself out there like this. How did you get that bravery to do it, especially about like such a personal topic? Yeah.
So, I mean, a couple different things. One, I wanted to build my business, and to build your business, you need visibility, and it's very helpful to produce new content on a weekly basis, right? So I come from the business world. It's a marketing tool, and you have to pick what works for you. When I was stopping drinking, podcasts were a huge tool for me. And the reason was because I heard women from very, very different situations, but some I could identify with really closely, meaning they were moms, they were successful, they didn't hit a huge rock bottom, and they were still telling me that life was better on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying it without shame and without judgment. And I just thought they were cool and brave and amazing. And I needed to hear those voices because I didn't have anyone in my personal life. None of my friends got it. If they struggled with alcohol, we had never talked about it. And by the way, if you hang out with a lot of drinkers like I did, they probably struggle with alcohol, but we don't talk about it, right? No, it's like that third rail. So I needed to hear from other women. The other thing I would say is that podcasts are actually pretty intimate. I don't like being a speaker on a big stage. I don't like putting myself out there on social media and telling deepest, darkest parts of my story so that it can be consumed in a 3-minute snack for anyone who's out there. If you do a podcast, what we're doing right now, it is a one-on-one conversation with really interesting people. You are connecting with them. You are learning something. I think it's like my hour of therapy every week when I interview people. And you put it out there and people can choose to consume it or not consume it. It's not that, oh my God, only 35 people like this. It's not that. It goes out there. People download, don't download. So it's been my absolute favorite thing. And the amazing thing about it is, so I don't usually have women on telling their stories of drinking and recovery. It's a coaching approach. So I have on therapists and coaches and other podcasters and authors, and we talk about everything. Yes, Dr. Anna Lemke, we talk about withdrawal. We talk about what alcohol does to your dopamine levels. I also have, authors and therapists on talking about perfectionism and parenting young kids and struggles in marriage and anxiety and how to deal with that. All of the things that are triggers for women to drink. And it's part of my continuing education, right? I had you on and we talked about like, what is inpatient? What is outpatient? How are different facilities unique in terms of what you need and what you look for? What are the biggest challenges as women go back to their lives? I didn't go to rehab, inpatient or outpatient programs. So I didn't have that information, but by having a conversation with you, it allows me to pass you on as a resource. It also gives me information so I can help my clients and my members more effectively. So I am in love with podcasting. And it's not as scary as people think because I'm just talking with you.
That's amazing. So that was sort of my next question of like, you've had some really big people on your podcast. How do you not get intimidated or nervous?
I do. I totally get nervous. And it depends on who it is. Usually I just completely fangirl over them. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you. I listened to your book on audio when like I was 20 days sober and I can't believe I'm talking to you. Like, just be honest, just fangirl over people if you're nervous. People like Dr. Anna Lemke, and I've interviewed some really impressive women. Gold star girl who likes to be an overachiever. I prepare. Like I I have read every book. I have underlined every page. I've worked on my questions. But my favorite conversations are with women I've actually become very, very good friends with other women who are sober podcasters, who are sober coaches. And I think women who have stopped drinking are the coolest because, they've got good stories. Like they typically like to party. So like they are fun to talk to, but they also have done some really brave work. They've done some personal development work. They are honest. They are vulnerable. They're able to laugh at themselves. They have empathy that is off the charts. So just conversations with people who have quit drinking, but I coach women. So I would say like 90% of my guests are women. It's fun. I don't know about you, but I have never laughed harder than talking with other women who quit drinking about drinking stories. You may feel shame now. It is funny when you get some distance from it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the best ways of healing. We know that just to heal the whole body, to heal the
Have
laugh.
empathy, have self-compassion, but also it is in your past. You don't need to be ashamed of that. It will, that whole quote about like, your story is going to help someone else, the more brave and vulnerable you are about it.
Well, I thank you so much. I was going to ask one more question, but I think you even answered it. One of your episodes, you shared about loving drinking because it allowed the unexpected to happen. And what I hear you sharing about is in sobriety, letting the unexpected happening. Like life is still really fun. I love the unexpected encounters that this world brings me. The sober world is incredible. It's incredibly creative. And hearing people that have really walked that edge and lived those lines, and like you said, done a lot of work, it's never dull, never boring. And I can say the same thing about my work. There is never a day that I don't learn something or that I've never been bored in this work because it's the most interesting people you'll ever meet. So thank you, Casey.
You're so welcome.
Can you give us one piece of advice you would give to a woman that's scared out there that she cannot reinvent herself at whatever age she is?
Okay, here's what I would say when you were talking about anything could happen. So when I stopped drinking, I thought that it was my worst case scenario in my life. It was my worst fear come true that I would quote unquote have to stop drinking. One of the coaching questions I love is to flip it around from like, why is this happening to me? Which is a very passive like victim mentality, to how is this happening for me? Even if you can't see it, even if you don't know how it's happening for you, just even putting that out in the universe, like this is so awful. Nobody quits drinking when it's going really well for them. Like when you decide you are going to stop drinking, things are not going well for you, right? And for me, it wasn't a big bottom. It was crushing anxiety, which should be a big bottom, but it wasn't. It was being hungover every day. It was thinking about drinking all the time. But how is this happening for you? And you can see it in retrospect. And so what I will say is, if I had been able to moderate my drinking, if it hadn't gotten to the point where I was like, oh my God, my worst fear is coming true, I actually have to stop. I never would have left corporate. I never would have looked deep into my anxiety or a mood disorder or whatever it is. I never would have met the people I met on this path. I would still be working in a stressful job that didn't fulfill me. I wouldn't have been in the New York Times. All these things contribute because I had to stop drinking. And I'm going to the Taylor Swift movie on Saturday, so I'll just put this out there. I was thinking about this the other day because I have an 11-year-old and we always talk about Taylor and what an amazing business person she is. So anyone who knows her knows the whole thing about her masters and how Scooter Braun wouldn't sell it back to her and owned all of her music. So she could have been like, why is this happening to me? This is the worst thing that ever happened. Looking back, because she re-released all those albums, that is why she became so popular, even out of the stratosphere, right? Because he wouldn't sell her back her music, she decided to re-release it all, which meant she had an album coming out every year, which meant her old album sold so much more, which meant she had the Eras Tour. So I know that's a ridiculous tangent, but I think for anyone just being like, not how is this happening to me, but how is this happening for me? will help you move forward and look for the opportunities in your life, even in a really scary time. So you struggling with alcohol is happening for you in some way, shape, or form. It is leading you to be able to get unstuck, to have to be brave and change some things in your life. And I don't know a single woman who has gone from being hungover and shaky and worried about her physical and mental and emotional health to not drinking and feeling empowered and confident and healthy and proud of yourself, who doesn't look back and say that's the best thing I've ever done.
Thank you so much, Casey. So thank you, Casey McGuire Davidson, for your time, for all you put out there. And I'm really excited to continue to speak with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Sober Spill today, where we got to speak with Casey McGuire Davidson, host of the Hello Someday podcast for sober, curious women. We got to talk about all things reinventing yourself in sobriety, how to create a new career, and how to find meaning in challenges. If you're interested in any of Casey's work, please click on the links below to follow her, check out her podcast, and check out her incredible website.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, Mountainside can help. Call 860-365-6764 to speak with our caring treatment team.